How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me once again. It is Wednesday. I just want to make sure. I think it's Wednesday. That sounds right. I had my neurologist appointment today, and I'm blaming that for scrambling my brain. It is Wednesday. It is August 30th. I cannot believe it's almost September. That's crazy to me. It is almost Labor Day, or is today Labor Day? I think Friday's Labor Day. That sounds right. I can't keep track of anything. Can't keep track of the date. I don't know what day of the week it is. I'm losing my mind. I have no energy at this point. In this delightful journey we call human incubation, aka pregnancy. No energy and still chores that need to be done. So Andy has been helping me like a hero. Thank God I have him. He's a wonderful help. It looks like Hurricane Idalia is done with Florida at this point, for which I am very grateful. I did hear that an oak tree fell on the governor's mansion here in Florida, which I think is terrible. DeSantis says there will just be more room for his kids to play baseball, which is kind of a silly, lighthearted response, but I appreciate it because I think that a lot of people are very upset about all this stuff. I think that a few people may have died in the kerfuffle, but nothing crazy. It wasn't as bad as Hurricane Ian or any of those other recent hurricanes, thank goodness. Fear Me It's Bree, also my birthday month. Happy birthday upcoming. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Again, we have Stuart. Thank goodness Stuart has the energy to return to us. Sounds like he's having as much fun as I am right now. At least mine has a set end date. Here's a scene in Florida right now. Florida National Guardsmen are using high water vehicles to transport, Tarpon Hills firefighters further into flooded zones to provide aid now that Hurricane Idalia has passed. So this is the fallout from Hurricane Idalia. They had some serious flooding over there. Absolutely wild. And our friend Adam, with whom we have met and had lunch and with whom we are great pals, was talking about how they installed a new community pool because their whole yard looks like this. Absolutely nuts. Mike says, I lived in Florida. The streets like that look like that several times a month. It always drains away within an hour. High water vehicles. Ha, I'm making fun of you. That's fine. You can make fun of Julio. He's just telling you what's happening. These are some of the things that come along with living in a state like Florida. And I feel like everyone in the state knows this is how it's going to work. Sorry about yawning, Bree. I know if you're not a psychopath, you will yawn too. I'm sorry. I've done it now. Hurricanes happen and people have to know that. And it's really driving up the price of insurance down here in Florida, which shouldn't surprise anyone. But at the same time, kind of frustrating because people want to live down here and it's awesome and people appreciate it. And I have a couple stories coming out of Florida and you guys are going to probably agree with me, but we'll see. Let's start with this first one because I just saw it getting ready for the show tonight. Thought it was super, super interesting. Let me move this over a little bit. There we go. Black surfer Andrew Sherlock Mills says his board was stolen and nailed to Florida tree in racist act. Do you guys think this is a case of Jussie Smollett, or do you think this really happened? Because I will let you in on a little secret. This happened right near where I live. And people here are not racist. And black people tend to be extremely pleasant and friendly. Everybody tends to be super nice. This is a wealthy part of Florida. Nobody is going to be rude to somebody of a different color. I just don't believe it. But let's read some of the details before we pass judgment. We will read. Black surfer Andrew Sherlock Mills says his board was stolen. The black surfer had his board stolen after clashing with surfers on Jupiter Beach. They claim he breached surfing etiquette. Black Surfers Group called the incident a symbolic lynching because, of course they did. Why would you ever miss an opportunity to call something, quote, a symbolic lynching? We are so bored. There is no conflict in our lives. There's nothing we're fighting for. We're looking for stuff like nailing a surfboard to a tree in a fit of rage to try to pin racism on. And we're succeeding. I don't think anything's going to come of this. I think it's genuinely a nothing burger. Just really annoyed me because it's nearby and I hate when people do this. A black surfer found his board nailed high on a tree like a lynching after an angry exchange with others in the waters off of Florida Beach. Andrew Sherlock Mills said he was assaulted and told he was not welcome during the clash on a Jupiter Beach and found his board gone when he left the water. He eventually discovered it nailed to a palm tree roughly 10 feet off the ground and a grisly echo of nooses hung to symbolize, hey, okay, Daily Mail, calm down. This is how the real racism and hate is. This is how real the racism and hate is in Jupiter, Florida, he told an Instagram account called black.surfers. They can't stand to see a black man in their waters. I was told I'm not welcome. Stole my board when I turned my back and they did this. Said it was a message. Give me a break. The beaches down here are populated almost entirely by black people, probably 90% of the time. No one ever argues about it. It's not an issue. There aren't racist people down here. We're all just going to the beach because it's fun. And it's actually something that we have in common, except for people like you who have to make everything a racialized issue. You're boring. I wouldn't want you there either. Not because of your skin tone, but because you're a drag. Give me a break. Yeah, this guy looks like he is itching for some kind of something. Mills was accused of breaking surfers' etiquette while in the water. They nailed it to a tree like a lynching, he added. The Instagram group ignited a furious debate about racism in surfing when they reported his remarks, including responses from some who accused Mills of not surfing properly. Now we might be getting to the heart of the issue. You obviously seem to not understand that still. No one is after you, man. None of us are racist. It has nothing to do with your race. It has to do with your etiquette. Mills said claims about breaches of surfing etiquette were simply cover for racism. Well, how do we know what you're saying isn't just cover for being bad at surfing or not understanding surfing etiquette? This happened after I was physically pushed around in the water by two dudes grabbing my board and a third guy screaming, "Get off our beach, you're not welcome here," and the rest of it. And the rest of it, what else did he say? Now I'm really curious. Kind of wish they had surveillance tape of this, unfortunately, because it is the beach, out in nature, doing natural, normal stuff. Probably not a whole lot of surveillance, hopefully. The 3 miles of sand north of West Palm Beach are a popular draw for surfers, and celebrities including golfer Greg Norman and tennis star Venus Williams have made their homes nearby. That's right, it is a wealthy part of Florida. It was also seen a spectacular boat parade by Donald Trump supporters in 2021. Mills said he did not call the police, but took the board down, stayed and surfed the whole day with a small board to show face. The small board to show face. I'm not sure what he means by that. A few locals that were there were apologizing and agreed it was wrong, he added. The Jupiter Police Department said it is investigating after discovering the incident on social media. I hope they do investigate it. I hope they investigate it thoroughly, and I hope they get to the bottom of it. I don't believe him. I do not believe him at all. Based solely on living here and based solely on my understanding of how Florida actually is. The Black Surfer Group said the attack was an example of white supremacy and described Mills as a black surfer father and husband who was subjected to racially motivated vandalism and a symbolic lynching of his board. There is no place for racism or hatred in surfing. None, they added. If you see something, say something. Hold people to account. What's done in the dark must be brought to the light. You're right! He should have talked to the police about this. I wonder why he didn't. And he says surfers are notoriously racist. Always burning crosses on the beaches. Well, there you go. You heard it from the man himself. He knows all about surfing culture. Can you guys imagine a more laid-back community than the surfing community? This is literally, the community that came up with the hang loose sign. I don't believe it for a minute. I have such a hard time with this. And to be honest, I have a hard time with reports like this of any kind of racism to this degree. I simply don't believe that that is the country that we live in. And consistently, we've come up with fake hate crimes. In fact, I kind of want to go talk to the Jupiter Police Department and see if they've come up with anything about this, because I believe it so little. And I'm really curious. And he says, I'm not a surfer. It's pretty similar culture to skating. Yeah, exactly. Super, super laid back. Dan says he shouldn't be culturally appropriating Polynesian culture. You are correct. Hello, Whisper. Welcome in. Hello, everyone. Sorenko says BLM really broke people's brains. That's right. Boof says, did they shout, "This is MAGA country," and pour bleach on the surfboard? I imagine they did, and that's probably why he was so scared to go to the police. And that's probably also why he stayed on the beach and continued surfing after he found that his board had been nailed to the tree. Weird case. So weird. I'm really having a hard time believing it. We'll see what happens. I personally am going to keep an eye on this one because it is nearby and see if we can get to the bottom of it, because I do not believe it for a minute. I wanted to tweet about it. I think I will do that. Might maybe try to tag in the Jupiter Police and see if they are working on this right now. Not sure why he didn't call them. Just saying. All right, you guys, I thought this was super interesting. This is from the Federalist, and I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with ham radio, but I have kind of a family connection to ham radio, and I'm really excited to read a little bit about it. I was like, this just looks refreshing after spending a lot of time on social media and just steeping in politics and current events and culture stuff. This looks like fun. Part social media and part prepper's paradise, ham radio is the perfect hobby. Okay, Roy. He might be a little bit biased. In a fractured nation with toxic public square, ham radio, even in this always online digital age, is a thriving part of civil society. Shannon Vore and her friend CJ Bouchard were out four-wheeling in their Jeep last fall when a passing trucker warned them of what looked like an ATV accident nearby. They said they'd investigate. Deep in the Rocky Mountains of northwest Idaho, there were no towns nearby and no cell phone service. But Before and Bouchard were newly licensed amateur radio operators, also known as hams. The amateur radio lingo, the operators are hams, and they transmit on ham radio, a spectrum of non-commercial radio frequencies. The two found the accident site and two critically injured teenage girls. After establishing contact with another ham on the national calling frequency, 146.420 megahertz, Bouchard handed off the microphone to Vore and began some basic medical treatment. He stopped one of the girls bleeding with a tourniquet. For the next 4 hours, Vore worked with a ham operator 20 miles away, and Cordeline, who was on the phone with 911. She relayed information and instructions to Bouchard and an off-duty EMT who also came upon the scene. Adding urgency to an already dire situation, a storm was brewing and a Life Flight Network helicopters were grounded before it could make a Life Flight Network helicopter was grounded before it could make an air rescue. 2 teams of EMTs were dispatched by ground, and Coeur d'Alene Ham guided them to the site with instructions from VOR. Both girls were transported to a hospital. Due to the actions of the radio-equipped Good Samaritans, both will recover. That's a fantastic story. Like an increasing number of people, VOR and Bouchard have discovered an American anachronism, ham radio. What they found is that means is more than a means of communication. They found a community and connection. Reconnection, service, and disaster readiness. In a fractured nation with a toxic public square, ham radio, even in this always online digital age, is a thriving part of civil society. It's a signal in the noise, and what's more, it's a robustly American institution. But more on that in a moment. Ham radio is booming, spurred on by several trends. COVID lockdowns forced people to stay home. Old radios were dusted off, while thousands of new ham operators were licensed to take to the airwaves. Ham radio is increasingly popular with off-roaders who find that amateur band signals can carry much further than citizen band or general mobile radio service signals. At the other end of the call, there's very likely a ham operator who is trained in emergency and disaster response. Many come to ham radio through prepping. The hobby's usefulness in a grid-down situation was demonstrated in the Maui fires when amateur radio operators stepped in after the cell phone system went down, passing along information to civilians and first responders alike. The nature of ham radio clears away the fringiest of preppers. It is governed by the Federal Communications Commission. It requires an exam, license, and registration with the federal government. That leaves the rest of us, every American who recalls the empty store shelves at the height of the pandemic, and every Texan who remembers the deadly freeze of 2021 to benefit from ham radio. The biggest boost ham radio has experienced in recent years has been Parks on the Air, or POTA, a successful promotion of the National Parks Service's 100th anniversary in 2016 that has grown into much, much more. To participate in POTA, ham set up in national, regional, and state parks across the globe, and look for contacts transmitting CQ, Parks on the Air. If they successfully contact at least 10 people, then they activate the park. That sounds interesting and fun. It sounds kind of like a treasure hunt. That's really neat. Let's see how they conclude this article. Hams have also helped NASA. Ham radio played a role in the Cold War era civil defense efforts. Amateur operators remained ready to work with the National Guard to relay messages in national emergency. This has evolved in today's radio amateur civil emergency service. Hams have also helped NASA in the early days of the space program. Cape Canaveral relied on amateur radio operators all over the world to communicate with orbiting space capsules. Remember that line of sight scene from Independence Day? Even today, NASA regularly asks hams for help documenting solar phenomena and tracking down zombie satellites that the government has lost contact with. That's so cool. I really like this kind of stuff because I don't know about you guys, but I am a little bit tired of listening to experts, and I love the idea of amateur people, who step in and take actions by themselves, who take initiative and take up a hobby of their own. All right, Stuart, thank you, sir. Baby coins for your baby's first skateboard. Much appreciated. 2 ladies, welcome in. This is awesome. I really like the idea of ham radio. If you guys don't know anything about it, you should 100% look into it. If nothing else, it just looks like a fun hobby. All right, I have a bunch of offhand stuff we're going to go through. I'm not feeling very well this evening, so we'll see how long we can go. Janice says, if you run that much power, you're going to need a good dual battery setup and a high output alternator, but hey, it is possible, yes. We had a neighbor when I was growing up who was very involved with ham radio. He had a whole tower. My father-in-law is involved. Very neat hobby for a certain kind of demographic that's looking for that kind of hobby. That doesn't require a whole lot of physical activity, but does require some mental stimulation and some exercise and getting licensed and making sure you keep up with all this stuff. So very neat. If you're not familiar, check it out. Let's see what we want to talk about next. Let's continue on the vein of Florida, because very interesting media nonsense. Oh, and then I want to show you guys, we'll talk about this one. And then on the topic of the media, we'll also talk about this headline from CNN. It's a little bit scandalous, but we will get into it because it's very important. All right, you guys. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but we're going to kind of unpack it with the Federalist. The media uses racist shooting to smear Ron DeSantis and to chill debate. This is from David Harsani, who is great. Insinuating the governor is partially responsible for racial violence is vile. It's also meant to shut you up. That is a great point and something I did not mention yesterday. So, a day after a racist psychopath murdered 3 black customers at a Jacksonville Dollar General store this week, NBC News informed us that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' policies toward the black community are coming under fresh scrutiny. Matt Dixon reports. Florida's black community, capital B, and beyond have been vocally opposed to the DeSantis administration's focus on wiping out higher education diversity programs. That's right. It all comes back to DEI, and this is how they're weaponizing it. Oh, you're going to touch our DEI programs? We're going to accuse you of literally killing minorities. Unbelievably unethical, insanely evil, honestly. The teaching of institutional racism to public schools, scrutinizing African American history courses. How dare you scrutinize an African American history course? And drawing a redistricting map that erased Northern Florida's only black performing congressional seat, which included the city of Jacksonville. What, you may wonder, does that string of completely unrelated left-wing grievances have to do with a shooting? Is the claim here that teaching kids 1619 style pseudo-history or funding higher education diversity programs would have changed the mind of a suicidal murderer? I mean, presumably the shooter was in school when the old Florida AP history course was still being taught, when DEI ideologues still had their state-funded jobs, and when Florida's only black performing congressional seat was still a thing. That's a great point. Thanks, David. And of course, even if the 21-year-old went on a shooting spree because he believed Florida's new honors curriculum was just a clandestine call from DeSantis to engage in racial violence, it says nothing about the text itself. You can read the state's history standards right here. There's nothing racist about them. Indeed, there's not. Of the 13-member committee of scholars who put together Florida's course, 5 were African American. There are, as Charles Cook at National Review has pointed out, 191 mentions of American slavery, and racism, the great evil of American history, is given plenty of attention. The entire controversy was ginned up over a single sentence that contends that some slaves, quote, developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. We're going to pause right there because that statement itself is completely 100% factual and true and in no way derogatory to anyone of any race at all, and has actually been stated in previous AP history courses. Just saying. AP's African American Studies curriculum released by the College Board also says slaves learned, quote, specialized trades during slavery and later used these skills to provide for themselves and others once free, because it is a statement of fact. And statements of fact aren't racist merely because they grate against your trendy ideology. Then again, all of this is ginned up. Such a good author. I love David. Take the Associated Press, once the model of straightforward journalism, now a left-wing advocacy group. That's right. I intentionally avoid using their articles. Ron DeSantis scoffed when the NAACP issued a travel advisory this spring warning black people to use extreme care if traveling to Florida, writes Steve Peoples. Just 3 months later, DeSantis is leading his state through the aftermath of a racist attack that left 3 African Americans dead. That is a direct link between stopping the spread of DEI-influenced CRT in Florida schools and the actual death of minority people in Jacksonville, Florida. Unbelievable. Yes, scoffing at the partisans of the NAACP, which engaged in this political stunt for just such a moment, is the right thing to do. It is preposterous to argue that Florida is an outlier of any sort when it comes to violence or racism. Then again, the NAACP's headquarters are in Baltimore, one of the nation's most dangerous cities for African Americans. That's right, also some of the worst schools in the country, but also the best funded. If it makes you feel any better, it shouldn't, because funding schools more does not make them better. Maybe Florida should be the one issuing travel advisories. Still, the concept of the AP piece, as with so many others like it, is that Republicans contribute to violence by virtue of having political opinions, and I really want that to sink in because that's an excellent point. My hair is driving me nuts. Sorry about that. Just sticking off at an angle there. Darn wind. This is not, incidentally, a standard employed when a trans person massacres kids in a Christian school, a racist murders 5 white cops, or even when a racist kills 10 in the blue state of New York. People's claims, for example, that Republicans have worked to appeal to the GOP's white conservative base, you are just automatons defined by skin color these days, by downplaying the existence of racism in America. This claim, really a lie, is based on a non-existent requirement that every American treat the far left's assertions about racism as objective truth. It's tantamount to accusing anyone who disagrees with QAnon of downplaying the existence of pedophilia in America. That's a very good parallel. No, people disagree about the scope of the problem, but according to the AP, if one diverges from the worldview of Black Lives Matter, they are in league with white supremacists. That's right. This is the black and white thinking that I try to warn everybody about. It's not a good way to go. It actually is a logical fallacy. Even criticism of wokeness, which I think most conservatives view as the catch-all for progressive cultural values, is, according to the NBC, an attempt to undermine people of color and other marginalized communities. You guys remember when they were talking about Drag Queen Story Hour and they said that attempts to remove Drag Queen Story Hour from libraries for kids was an act of racism? And we all just went, what? What the hell are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense at all. If you disparage wokeness, you are basically buying Klansmen AR-15s, which is very convenient. Because it's become so common from the left to insinuate or blame conservatives for inciting violence, we might forget how vile those accusations can be. But they're not only contemptible for the obvious reasons, they are means to shut you up. No one should let these nuts hinder their ability to engage in political disagreements, and no one should let cynical activists masquerading as journalists use those nuts to chill speech either. Which, of course, is the point of all this. Good article, nice and brief. I got to read the whole thing, which is awesome. Yeah, if you guys don't follow David Harsani, Harsaniy on Twitter, he's a great follow. And yeah, that's entirely correct. And that's a great deeper point that he brings up that I didn't mention yesterday, for sure. This is why I always appreciate reading other people's points of views, because looking at things from different angles is always useful. So let's look at my other most recent example of media malfeasance, because this is wild. This is really wild. Let me scroll down a little bit. I'm not sure where it is. Oh, yeah. Okay. CNN got nuked by Community Notes, and here's what happened. Here's their headline. 2 men in Uganda are facing separate charges of, quote, aggravated homosexuality, at close quote, an offense punishable by death under the country's controversial new anti-gay laws. Can you imagine living in a country where you could be punished by death merely for the act of being gay? This is the question CNN wants you to think is at play here. But it's not, and Community Notes is quick to point this out. Readers added context they thought people might want to know. One of these men is charged with sexually assaulting a disabled man, and the other is charged with sexually assaulting a minor. That's not homosexuality. And this was very interesting to me when there was coverage of this Uganda law. I was like, what on earth? How crazy backwards must they be to talk about aggravated homosexuality as punishable by death? And then I was like, okay, so what exactly does aggravated homosexuality look like exactly? Because I'm wise to some of what the media likes to do. They're lying. They're lying. Because when they talk about aggravated homosexuality, they're referring to exactly charges like this: sexual assault of disabled people and pedophilia. And CNN will never tell you that. They will keep trying to smear a totally different country as completely un-Western. It's not even a Western country. They're trying to slime this country for having its own laws because they don't agree with their progressive views. And thank goodness for Elon Musk buying Twitter, because this is worth it. This was worth $44 billion. I don't care what you say. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Was shooting actually racist though, or was it racism? It was racist. He wrote a whole manifesto. And I was talking earlier about how convenient it was that this guy put a swastika on his AR-15. A lot of different moving parts there, but I will say at the end of the day, I do believe that the motivation behind this was, whether it was organic or CIA fueled, was racist. And it's too bad that people like that are out there. But the fact of the matter is that we need to recognize that there is something deeply wrong with our society, and we need to do everything we can to fix it, because those people exist, and also we need to make sure that we can and do take steps to protect ourselves from people like that. Excuse me. We are talking about Verde Salsa. Verde Salsa is fantastic. Janice says, listening while reading, ham versus CBCB is capped at 4 watts of power by the FCC. Ham radio is capped at 1,500 watts of power. Ham radio is literally potentially 375 times more capable than CB. If you run that, yeah, that's crazy. That's really interesting. I have a lot to learn about this particular hobby. I'm sure that my father-in-law would be more than happy to fill me in on all of this stuff. But hopefully next time we get up there to see the grandparents, I'm sure with the baby, we will talk about that for sure, because that's a great hobby that has nothing to do with current events or politics, nothing to do with culture, gets your head out of all that stuff. So we have a libertarian take. I hope you guys are ready for this. I always appreciate our libertarian takes because they're always a little bit off the wall, as libertarians tend to be. We love Phil of All That Remains, fantastic friend and role model. One of my biggest fans when I was at Timcast. Really good to meet in person. He has a somewhat black-pilled take on this because DC Drano tweets optimistically, breaking, Colorado school board votes to allow Jaden, the guy from yesterday who went into school with a Gadsden flag patch and got in trouble for it, to allow Jaden to wear Don't Tread on Me patch on school grounds. Victory for the First Amendment. So let's read what they had to say, and then we'll see why Phil is not keen on this. Yesterday, the student returned with the patch still visible on his backpack. Following the district's direction, Vanguard administrators pulled the student aside so that they could speak with his parents and the district. Upon learning of these events today, the Vanguard School Board of Directors called an emergency meeting. From Vanguard's founding, we have proudly supported our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and ordered liberty that all Americans have enjoyed for almost 250 years. The Vanguard School recognizes the historical significance of the Gadsden flag and its place in history. This incident is an occasion for us to reaffirm our deep commitment to classical education in support of these American principles. Blah, blah. At this time, the Vanguard School Board and the district have informed the student's family that he may attend school with the Gadsden flag patch visible on his backpack. How gracious of these overlords to allow this young man to freely express himself and to freely speak, given that he is functionally a prisoner of theirs, it turns out, for the entire school year, apparently. Let's see what Phil has to say about this, because I'm not very impressed with their statement. It's not a victory. It's a warning. Every American must understand how grave a situation we are in. This is what a cultural revolution looks like. There is an effort to undo liberalism in the United States, and Democrats need to wake the F up and realize they are endorsing totalitarianism. I think they know. I think they don't care. And that's a problem. Mitch comments, his rights never should have been up for a vote to begin with. Correct. Yes. The fact that these battles have to endlessly be fought is the defeat. If not for social media pressure, they never would have given in. Exactly the very fact the system pushed matters this far and felt the need to decide without censuring the teacher means nothing will ultimately change. This is the goal of these Frankfurt School /woke/commie revolutionaries. I will be shocked if the teacher doesn't try to weaponize the rest of the class against this kid as a struggle session to bully him until he gives in. Yes. Glad I'm not the only one who didn't see this as any sort of victory. Yeah, this struck me as a shot across the bow, especially because I think I commented this article. Let me see if it's here in the response to DC Drano. Yeah, I said this isn't victory, this is a shot across the bow, and here's why. There was another case in Virginia. This teen is leaving his rural Virginia school after an official told him to remove American flags from his pickup truck. My family fought for America, and I feel like I should be able to represent the flags they fought for. Of course he should! Of course he should. That is his right to freedom of expression, which is right up there with freedom of speech. A Virginia teen is refusing a demand from high school officials to remove 2 American flags from his pickup truck, opting to leave the school altogether instead to be homeschooled. Staunton River High School student Christopher Hartless said he was just exercising his First Amendment rights by flying the flags, according to a Fox 19 report. My family fought for this. I care about these flags, etc. His stepmom, Christina, said Wednesday Hartless went to his rural Bedford County school with the flags mounted on his truck, but school administrators told him he needed to take them down because it was a distraction. So it was a distraction for him to have flags on his vehicle in the parking lot of a school. Yeah, I'm going to have to call BS on this one. I don't understand how it's distracting if they have one on the flagpole that every other student can see. Heartless reportedly said, that's a good point too. I told my son if this is what he believes in, then we're both going to stand behind him all the way. This week, Heartless said he was told he needed to take the flags down by school officials. The school also revoked his parking pass, so they're not ready to give up. Kingery reportedly doesn't want him to have to ride the bus, so they have decided to homeschool. If they're willing to change and let kids fly the American flag, then I'll put him back in school, she said. The high school issued a press release Tuesday noting that a student driver contract for the Bedford County Public Schools, which has been in place in all three of the high schools for over a decade, prohibits student drivers from flying large flags or banners on their vehicles due to their potential to distract or obstruct the view of student drivers as they're navigating the school parking lot. So, one of the things they could have done with that is say something like, you need to display this flag in a different way. You need to maybe, I don't know, there's got to be some other way you can display a flag on the back of your truck that's not huge. And I could see it possibly obstructing your view. So, you could take any of several steps to make sure it doesn't get in the way. How about just go with this one? Try to make sure that they're not in the way of your rear view window. Try to make sure they're not getting in other people's ways. That's fine. I understand the safety factor, but at the same time, you need to recognize that he should have the freedom to do this, but they don't seem to care, and they are just doubling down on it because, again, I really end up feeling like these public schools treat the students like prisoners, and it's disturbing. In fact, I tweeted out yesterday some of the stats about what happens when kids have to go back to school. When kids go back to school, suicides go up, which is incredibly distressing. And I just said something, I said state education is bad, because I really don't think you can say it any better than that. Every year, youth suicides drop off during the summer and spike at the start of the school year. School is so bad, kids actually want to die. These charts are sobering. Our kids deserve so much better than this. Michael says, big time, especially chilling when one learns that Mondays during the school year is a peak time for adolescent suicide. That's awful. And Rebel Educator says, if your kids resent going to school on Monday, something is wrong. As a one-off, sure, but every week, if your kid consistently gets a Sunday night scaries, something's wrong. School should be held to a higher standard of customer satisfaction, and the kid is the customer. That's right. The kid is the customer. The kid is the person who decides whether you're doing a good job. It's a little bit like the economy. People are like, I see leftists all the time who are saying things along the lines of, why don't people believe that the economy is good? What's going on here? They say the economy is bad, but it's actually good. And I'm like, if people believe that the economy is bad, I got news for you. The economy is bad because the people are the economy. The kid, the student, is the customer when it comes to school, okay? If the customer is not satisfied with the work that you're doing, you are doing something wrong. It's like Principal Skinner in The Simpsons. Am I out of touch? No, it's the kids who are wrong. Of course, that's what they're all saying 24/7. They don't care about your kids. They are nothing but teachers' unions, which are just tools of the Democratic Party, and they are out to either indoctrinate or openly harm your children. If you have kids in public school, try to find out something else that you can possibly do with them, because your kids 100% deserve better. Absolutely. At the end of the day, I believe, because I'm super pro-life, I truly believe that kids actually have intrinsic value because they're humans, right? Humans deserve to live. They deserve to have good educations. If we live in a first world country, that's something we need to prioritize. If we have I don't want to say progressive because it's such a tainted word, but if we have a society that's actually trying to move in a positive, increasingly scientific, increasingly smart, increasingly connected direction, then we have to take this seriously. This is something that we need to emphasize. We owe it to our children. And I know I learned this really hard during COVID. People do not care about kids at all. People will throw kids right under the bus if they think it'll buy them 15 minutes extra on this earth. And to me, that's just gross. And you can see it a little bit too in the way that some boomers treat wealth, basically. They are going out of their way to spend everything they have so that following generations get nothing. Whatever, that's a personal choice at the end of the day, but I do believe that speaks very deeply to a societal idea about prioritizing yourself over future generations and kids. But yeah, so we're going to read a little bit about California, and then I think I'm going to call it a night because I am dying here. Somebody says, kids are the product. Are they the product? Because as far as I can tell, kids are a product that's already created that just come into the schools to be molded and shaped in some way and form. But we'll see. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Experts are warning against giving children Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro, claiming it could lead to a wave of abuse and health problems because the long-term effects are unknown. No effing S. This is exactly what I said when we were talking about this, because experts were also calling to give kids these medicines to help them lose weight. And I was just like, are you actually insane? What the heck is wrong with you? Give me a break. Let's read about California in case we weren't depressed enough already. California AG wages legal war to hide kids' transgender pursuits from parents. This is from Tristan Justice. What a great, noble last name. California AG currently is launching an assault on parents and families with a new lawsuit asserting state control over children. How shocking of California to be doing this. California AG is launching an all-out assault on parents and families with a new lawsuit. Right. On Monday, State Attorney General Rob Bonta sued to stop a new policy in a Southern California school district that requires students to notify parents whenever a child identifies as transgender and begins to pursue a so-called gender transition. The new guidelines adopted by the Chino Valley Unified School District in July would have required schools to tell parents if their child sought changes in pronoun use, sports participation, or bathroom arrangements contrary to his or her sex. The state's Democrat Attorney General argues the district's new disclosure rule violates students' civil rights and risks emotional, physical, and psychological harms. This is the other argument they take. So if you say, no, I don't want to transition my child, they will come at you with a suicide argument. You want your child to commit suicide. If they are talking about disclosing the truth about what's happening with your child at school, they will say that you are the abuser because there's a risk that if your child tells you that they're transgender, you will, who knows, commit childicide or something. What's the term? Pedocide, I guess, maybe, I suppose, since pedo is technically the Latin word for child, unfortunately. Every student has the right to learn and thrive in a school environment that promotes safety, privacy, and inclusivity, regardless of their gender identity. So more fluff words from this AG. We're in court challenging Chino Valley Unified's forced outing policy. Forced outing policy. So it's not just communicating honestly and openly with parents. It's a forced outing policy. And this is how they twist the language to get what they want. Gotta watch out for it. For wrongfully and unconstitutionally discriminating against and violating the privacy rights of LGBTQ plus students. This is such a wedge to put between children and their parents because you know who has rights to their children's medical information under HIPAA, from my understanding? Parents. Because their children are less than 18 years old and they have someone who is responsible for them. HIPAA allows providers to disclose information to parents, right? To caregivers, to adoptive, foster parents, actual biological parents, whatever. Kids can't just go through the medical system doing their own thing. Kids need someone to speak on their behalf. St. Miles says morons. I don't think these people are morons. I think they're more demonic and or conniving and or power hungry. Forced outing policy wrongfully endangers the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of non-conforming students who lack accepting environment in the classroom and at home. Go fart in a phone booth, seriously. Because they never give any statistics about what happens as far as parents go. If school teachers tell a parent that their child is questioning their gender, probably because of something that a teacher at school said. That's the other thing too. This is such a veil to hide the responsibility that teachers have to their students and to parents. Where did my kid get this idea? Oh, it was from the teacher. Oh, that's why you're not telling me, because you know that I'm not going to like that teachers are socially transitioning and literally grooming my child. And no, I don't care what YouTube does to me with that word. Literally grooming my child without my knowledge or consent. So this isn't about forced outing. This isn't about violent parents who will have a bad reaction to having a questioning youth. This is about teachers getting an out and making sure that they are never held accountable for what they do. This is Marxism 101. You get between parents and children and you force that divide. You push it. You make the kids think that you are their only friend, their only confidant, and that their parents are out to get them. This is exactly par for the course, and California is complicit in it, and not only complicit in it, but actually doing everything they can to make sure that it happens even more. Stuart, parents need to take back control of their kids' education, homeschool 100%. People need to leave California because this is a hot mess. Not good at all. However, there is some good news coming from California. Then we'll wrap it up here because I'm just dying. California activists file ballot initiatives to counter the state's transgender policies. Excuse me. Let's see if there's anything about Chino Valley in there. Proposals would require schools to alert parents if their child is trans, restore state sex segregated bathrooms and locker rooms in high schools, and ban puberty blockers and sex change surgeries for minors. These are very important ballot initiatives. California activists on Monday filed 3 ballot initiatives to counter some of the state's transgender policies, including those allowing minors to obtain sex changes and requiring high school girls to compete against biological boys. The proposals from Protect Kids California, which would require schools to alert parents if their child asks to be treated as a different gender, prohibit biological boys from competing on girls' sports teams, restore sex-segregated bathrooms and locker rooms in high schools, and ban puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and sex change surgeries for minors. Activists see California, which led the way in enshrining gender ideology into state law, as a major battleground in the nationwide movement to safeguard children from irreversible sex changes. 100%. Groups opposed to California's liberal transgender policies have gained strength this year. A statewide poll in June found that 62% of California voters would support a law requiring schools to tell parents if their child is identifying, requesting to identify, or being treated as a gender that doesn't align with their biological sex. That's great. And this is why I'm kind of reluctant to say that California is completely lost, because there are tons of people in California and not all of them are liberal. A lot of them, especially up in the north, the state of Jefferson, those kinds of people, the more agricultural people, very common sense, very down to earth, a lot of conservatives over there, just because there are a lot of people there. And it's something worth remembering when you try to write off a whole state. I will say at the same time that Californians destroyed my home state, and I hold no special compassion for them personally. And I think that if you're not careful, in fact, I tweeted about this, I said that Jaden and his mother remind me of what Colorado Springs used to be like, and Vanguard reminds me of how Colorado has changed and fallen, and I said, keep California out of your state. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Californian ideologies are poison, absolutely poison, and I bet you a nickel that if you were to ask a lot of these California conservatives, they would 100% agree. It is no joke. Andy says, just got to protect yourself from fentanyl commercial. Yes, definitely do so. You guys should all be protecting yourself from fentanyl. Andy says, how do they know how sore I am from skating? Sorry, dear. He is indeed. Adrian says, poor mommy lady. It's fine. I'm just complaining. Just a little tired. Just a little burned out from too many appointments. And I only have like 4 more this week. Kids are not entitled to privacy while under guardianship, says Josie. I think that's true. And this gets on to what we were talking about yesterday with parents having a responsibility to their children and also being in charge of their kids. Like, not owning their children, but being so incredibly responsible for them, taking all of the responsibility. They really assume a lot of the rights that their children will assume later in life. And they should have the power to shape their child in their own ideology. But yeah, I digress. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. We made it 45 minutes. I'm pretty impressed. Mr. Proxy says, I'm Canadian, Andy, so when you say that, I picture you on ice skates. Yes. Well, we don't have very much ice down here in Florida. Janice says, it's a crime for them if you backtrack and say you're not after they said they were another gender or had a different preference. Yes, so if you do want to detransition, they are not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. Insurance companies won't help you. The doctors who helped you transition in the first place won't help you detransition. Absolutely nuts to me. But it makes sense. And I posted about this on Instagram. I said that I posted this meme image of a man who's wiping his tears with a stack of cash, right? And it says, the philosophy behind gender change surgeries for minors. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. You are creating a lifelong patient who will need hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in treatments and therapies over the course of their entire life. You have them locked in, right? It's the perfect racket, really, as far as I'm concerned. And it's something we need to watch out for, because this is what happens. I've been banging this drum for a really long time. This is what happens when capitalism is divorced from morals and ethics. You come up with something like this. Mr. Proxy says, love your streams, Lids. Keep it up. You are so much better than the other podcasters, etc., in my opinion. Thank you guys very much for joining me, especially you, Mr. Proxy, for saying such wonderfully nice things. We are safe from the storm, Texas Rangers. We are just fine down here in southeast Florida. In fact, it was very hot and sunny today. What was I going to say? You guys, I put this up as an audio-only podcast every night on Spotify. And I get a few more listens every day and every week. And I would welcome you guys to go over there and check it out for yourselves. I am fun to listen to. I listen to myself on a relatively regular basis just to see what I sound like. I'm not boring. I try to describe everything I'm looking at so that it makes sense even as audio only. So go over there and check it out on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you all again so much for joining me. As we always say over here, stay safe, stay well, stay out of Target. Until next time, bye guys.
How's it going?